Hello, and welcome to this month's Synth tutorial with computer music. In this edition, we're going to be creating the archetypal string synthesizer sound, reminiscent of the string synthesizers from the 70s, but still very much in vogue today with many contemporary bands and artists. So let's get started straight away by opening up your DAW and load in an instance of the ZebraCM plugin ready to use. We'll begin by performing an Initialize, which we do by going to the display, which is right at the top in the center of the plugin. Click and come down to the bottom of the menu, you'll see the word Init for Initialize. When you click that, the entire plugin becomes initialized and we have a default patch ready to begin creating our sound. It's also advisable to turn down the master volume on this plugin, which you can do by going to the bottom right hand side. You'll see that there's a pot with master written above it. This is the volume. Click and hold on it and drag the pot until it's roughly in the 12 o'clock position. We're going to be referring a lot to the values that appear in the upper display, and as you can see, we're setting the master to a value of 50. We'll begin at the very front end of our sound, and that starts with oscillator number 1. We're going to be using many of the default settings that are already in play. First of all, we have a sawtooth, which is our default, which we'll be keeping. We also want to set the volume to 100, which is also the default. Where we begin to make some alterations is with the aliasing of the waveforms. We want more than one waveform, we just want two. So we're going to click on the number 2, which will give us two aliased waveforms simultaneously. This will sound a little bit odd, because we have two waveforms on top of each other, but we can detune them very subtly by clicking and holding on the detune pot and dragging it to a value of -5. It now sounds like this. Oscillator 2 is going to require a very similar set of parameters. So first of all, making sure we have a sawtooth in play, which is our default, but we do need to turn the volume up to a value of 100 to mirror oscillator 1. We also need to activate the two-wave aliasing, and we also need to move to the detune pot, but this time instead of selecting a value of -5, we'll select a value of +5. This gives us a nice thick texture like this. Next, we're going to move to the filter section. String machine sounds are generally considered to be quite bright, so we want to get rid of a lot of the low frequencies that are in our sound. We can do this using a high-pass filter. We particularly like the 24 dB high-pass filter, so that's the one we're going to choose from the drop-down menu. We're also going to set our cutoff to a value of 73. If you play your sound while adjusting the cutoff pot, you'll hear the sound appear as you adjust the pot. Next, we're going to move to the envelope section. And in actual fact, we don't need envelope 2 on this occasion because we're not going to be using the envelope to do any modulation. What we will be doing is using envelope 1 to control the amplitude, or if you prefer, the volume of our sound. Set the attack pot to a value of 15, the decay pot to a value of 50, which should be its default, the sustain pot to a value of 80, which should also be its default, and finally the release pot to a value of 22. This means that we get a subtle but fairly quick fade in when we play a note, and a similarly subtle fade out on the back end with the release phase. In order to create a little bit of movement in our sound, we're going to apply a tiny bit of vibrato to oscillator number 1. Going back to the oscillator 1 section, you see there is a dedicated pot with vibrato LFO1 written underneath it. Set this to a value of 37. You'll now hear an ever so slight undulation in the tone of oscillator 1. This undulation is controlled from the LFO section, which is down on the right hand side here. You can control the rate of oscillation of the LFO by adjusting the rate pot. We think something in the middle or relatively slow will give you the best effect. Now we're going to move to the back end of the signal chain, and we're going to use some effects to thicken out the texture. The ZebraCM is equipped with effects, but you can just as easily do this within your DAW if you prefer. Some of your third-party plugins that you have available in your DAW might be more effective than the ones you have available in the ZebraCM. Moving down to the bottom right-hand side of the plugin, you can see a section that says Mod FX. If you double-click on that, it will activate that section of the effects. You can now move over to the Mod Effects section on the far left-hand side, and we're going to select the chorus from the Mode drop-down menu. You'll now hear a sound like this. You can then alter the settings to suit your purpose, but we quite like a more generous mix and also greater depth. It might also be a good idea to add some reverb on the back end, and we can also apply this within the Zebra CM. Moving over to the right hand side, double click on the little box that has Rev written in it for reverb, and you will then hear some reverb on the back end of your signal. Here again, adjust these settings to suit your purpose, but if you wet it up a little bit, it'll sound even more glorious. Finally, we're using the sound very much as a lead line sound, but it works particularly well as a counter melody sound, or you could use it to just play some chords to pad out your entire harmony within your track. Either way, it's a great sound. That's it for this month. We'll see you next time.